Safety, Health, and Welfare Committee meeting of June 29, 2021, beginning at 7:02 p.m. Present are committee members Broussard, Williamson, and Limpert, as well as council members Glassburn, Kelly, and Heeman, Council President Jones, the Mayor, Assistant Law Director O'Malley, Directors Lieber and Gallo, and guests, and Mr. Schuman. We're here to discuss a liquor permit application, permit number 7393-533-0790, which would be issued to Riser Foods Company, DBA Water Tower Square Get-Go, number 3360, located at 27268 Lorraine Road, North Olmsted, Ohio, 44070. There is no objection by the police department, and I don't have any questions, so I'll open it up to committee. Any questions, concerns? Mr. Limpert?
So this is a renewal for that Get-Go?
It's showing as new.
Do we know why are they moving the store in the tower area? Oh, maybe I need to talk a little louder with this mask. Are they moving the location of the liquor store, and that's why they need to?
I don't have that information.
Okay. I'm just curious about that, since they already have. My understanding was they already had a liquor permit. So that'd be my question, but I don't think that would abstain me from moving it forward.
Okay.
Tonight to get that answer, though.
I appreciate that. Okay. Any questions or comments from council? Okay. Seeing none, I will make a motion to not object to all of council to liquor permit number 7393-533-0790 to Riser Foods Company, DBA Water Tower Square, Get-Go number 3360 at 27268 Lorraine Road, North Olmsted, Ohio, 44070, and ask for a second.
Second.
Seconded by Councilwoman Williamson. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That'll pass 3-0. And we'll conclude the meeting at 7:04 p.m.
We'll begin the Building, Zoning, and Development Committee meeting this evening at 7:05 p.m. Present are committee members Williamson, Limpert, and Schuman, Council President Jones, Council members Broussard, Glassburn, Heeman, and Kelly, Mayor, Assistant Law Director, our Finance Director, our Human Resources Director, our Planning Director, and guests. On the agenda this evening is CMS 21-18812-LLC, located at 31441 Lorraine Road. I'm going to turn this over to our Planning Director at this time.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We're also joined tonight by the property owner, Dale Schmidt, who can answer any questions that council might have regarding this project. This property is zoned Limited Industry District. It's the southwest corner of Lorraine Road and Industrial Parkway. The owner's proposing to construct a new office and warehouse facility. It's a permitted use in the district. The building will be approximately 11,960 square feet. It will be masonry and metal wall panels with overhead doors for trucks located along the south elevation, and one overhead door in the primary man doors located across the north elevation of the building that faces Lorraine. The BZBA did grant 2 variances, one for pavement and parking setback along the west property line and one for pavement setback along the south property line. So the applicant made sure to provide for a sufficient truck turn on the site in and out of those overhead doors. They're also proposing a new dumpster enclosure in the southwest corner of the site. After a couple iterations, the stormwater design has gone underground, so we appreciate the applicant working through our engineering requirements for underground detention. They've also provided a landscape plan to show planting clusters along the street lawn and also adjacent to the front elevation. Irrigation's provided as required. The only lighting proposed will be building-mounted light fixtures. The applicant can get sufficient lighting without introducing new pole fixtures. And no signage is proposed at this time. They'll be waiting to determine the tenant mix to determine if those tenants wish to have signage, and we'll propose a package at that time. So there were some conditions of approval recommended by the Planning and Design Commission that I do recommend council incorporate into your approval as well. If you have any questions, please let me know.
Thank you, Director. Are there any questions from committee? Any questions from council? Okay. Seeing none, then I will make a motion that we recommend approval to all of council with the conditions set forth by the Planning and Design Commission. And ask for a second.
Second.
Seconded by Councilmember Limpert. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, that motion passes with a vote of 3-0, and our meeting concludes at 7:08 PM.
In the opinion of the Ohio Ethics Commission, in advising on Division 1A1 of Section 2921.42 of the revised code and Division D of Section 102.03 of the revised code, a city council member who is the family member of a potential employee is prohibited from authorizing, approving, voting upon, discussing, deliberating, recommending, or otherwise using the authority or influence inherent in the position and prestige of his office, formally or informally, to secure, renew, modify, or renegotiate his spouse or family member's individual employment relationship with the city, or to authorize or approve payments for family members for services rendered in their public employment. It is my opinion that that would prohibit Councilperson Limpert from participating in this event. I'm not going to call this meeting to order until that is either resolved or we will go into executive session.
Mr. Glassburn, my understanding was that I could abstain when the meeting started. Mr. Law Director, can I get an opinion?
Council, it would be my opinion and advice to Councilman Limpert that he not merely abstain, but also refrain from any form of participation. To the extent that your appearance there amongst the council members constitutes participation, I would advise that you recuse yourself from the participation, which goes beyond merely abstaining on any vote, and not be present on the council dais. This is a public meeting. So long as it's a public meeting, you're welcome to remain in the room. However, if you choose to do so, there's apparently this suggestion that you might be attempting to influence the matters that proceed with regard to your father's appointment. So you certainly could remove yourself from the room altogether. The reference was made to executive session. The members of the committee and the members of council, since this is a personnel matter, it's something that can be subject to executive session. The committee could make a motion to conduct these proceedings in executive session, and the applicant or the candidate, he may prefer to have the matter held in a public hearing. And if and when the committee were to move to go into executive session, the candidate's preference in that regard could be announced. But as to Dwayne Limpert, the councilman, I haven't studied the ethics opinion, but I don't doubt what was just read, and it's consistent with our overall view.
Mr. Law Director, if I can interrupt, you didn't answer my question. My question was, do I remove myself from the meeting after it starts so it's on the record? And that's why I've been sitting here, because I thought I would do that when the meeting started.
And that's entirely
If that's not the case to put
appropriate.
on the record, then I can just walk out here. But
That's
typically-
entirely appropriate. And
Yeah.
I apologize for that lengthy answer that failed to answer your question.
Thank you.
I'm trying to keep my track record. I'm trying to, people expect a certain long-winded answer. I don't want to disappoint anyone. But yes, that's not inappropriate. If that answers your question, yes.
Thank you.
It is now 7:20. I will call I can't do that. He's not a member of the committee.
Yeah,
Oh, that's a good point.
You can call that's a good point. That's a good point that you're making, but if you called the committee to order and invited him to announce his recusal, that would accommodate what he's apparently requesting. Then it's on the record.
excuse me, Law Director. As not being a member of the committee, I don't think he actively has to recuse or state that on the record. That's not the committee's business tonight.
It's something that he evidently would like to do.
As a,
And the way that the room is set up, the way that the council is seated, is to the members of the public, they don't know necessarily the difference between the committee and the council as a whole. So for sake of ethical consideration and appearances, I think what the councilman is requesting is entirely reasonable.
Is that, Mr. Clerk, when we read the minutes, we announce the committee members and then other council members and other members are present, correct? Okay. Let me, since we're not on the record, but let me, just for my colleague's sake, the intent here wasn't to make this a grand gesture or anything like that. I thought I could excuse myself. That's why I went to the law director to ask him what I should do. And his advisement was that I could recuse myself when the meeting started, was my assumption, and him saying that I could do so. Clearly, the committee chair doesn't want to do that, and I'm happy to abide by the way he wants to run his committee. And I thank you all for your time before we start the next meeting, and thank you.
It is now 7:22, and I will call to order the Intergovernmental Relations Committee. Present are committee members Glassburn, Schuman, and Heeman, council members Williamson, Jones, Brassard, and Kelly, the mayor, the assistant law director, the finance director, the planning director, and guests. The item for consideration tonight is the appointment, the confirmation of the appointment of a safety service director, Mr. Dwayne Limpert. Mr. Limpert, if you'd like to join the conversation, the hearing here at the microphone and sit at the table at the dais next to the mayor, feel free, or if you'd rather stand, feel free. Okay. Mr. Limpert, would you like to begin with any opening remarks?
Just that I am very honored to be here, to be a selection of our mayor, and that, quite frankly, I think I am very well qualified for the job. I have tried to communicate the best way I can with the clerk of council throughout the preliminaries, twice approaching him as far as any additional information on anything you might want. And the first time I was told nothing, and then there was a whole list of items that had been requested that I was not informed of, and then further have asked. So if there's anything I'm not completely up on, it's not because I have not been willing to come forward to give you all I have. I serve here to serve the residents of North Umstead.
Thank you. Mr. Limpert, as I just referenced in the discussion before the committee began, this matter of having a family member supervising another family member is one of the hot button issues that pops up in ethics law.
Mr. Chairman, I don't know how familiar you are with the charter or, for example, your duties, but I do not report or am not supervised by members of council. I serve the people of North Umstead, if I am affirmed, at the pleasure of the mayor's office with the affirmation of the council coming and going. A number of you have served on council when I have been a director, and I think you will find I have been most accommodating, very helpful, but I know the first thing I learned at newly elected official school is as a councilman, I was not to try to in any way supervise any employee, except perhaps the clerk of council, if at the will of council, I was appointed to be his supervisor. So I'm not sure where you're going with it, but I believe if you do your homework, there's not an issue here.
Mr. Limpert, I'm very familiar with the Ethics Commission law. I'm familiar with the duties of public officials. What I'm asking you is, have you reached out to the Ohio Ethics Commission for an advisory opinion on this specific matter?
No, I have not,
Why have you not?
because it strictly did not seem necessary, particularly since I do not report to the city council. They are not my supervisor in this issue. As they say, I will accommodate them, I will support them, I will do all I can for them.
Mr. Chairman?
Mayor?
I did reach out to the law department before I made the nomination of Dwayne Limpert and just asked if there was a problem, and they said there was no problem. So,
Mr. Chair.
Ms. Heeman?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mayor, I appreciate that answer, but that wasn't the question. The question is the Ohio Ethics Commission. So, for example, our councilperson Glassburn recuses himself automatically from certain issues. His wife serves as a school board member. That is not a direct relationship in any way, shape, or form to our council, but yet they heed the warning of the Ohio Ethics Commission. And we do also have nepotism policies. We have many things that were not considered by, the applicant, nor sadly by our experienced council person, who did not even feel the need to reach out to anyone prior to coming to this meeting. So I would ask why, Mr. Limpert, you didn't think that there could be an Ohio ethics question.
Mr. Chairman? Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Schuman?
Perhaps we could hear from the law department?
Thank you, Mr. Schuman, Mr. Chairman. I would agree with the mayor's assessment that matter was addressed, and it was not an issue or a question. I would also agree with Mr. Limpert's assessment of the relationship between a council member and a director. It's not a supervisory employment relationship per se. Your duties are outlined by the charter. The charter describes the mayor's authority to make the appointment, your authority to review, approve, and consent. In fact, it's quite a unique, I think, and unusual circumstance. Many may recall the history where these positions were removed from the charter and put into the ordinance, and two ordinances. And the ordinances refer back to the mayor's authority to make the appointment and provide that disapproval by a two-thirds majority of the members, a two-thirds vote of the members to disapprove. And I would contrast that with the two-thirds of eligible, members eligible to vote for removal. And I think there's definitely a difference between the two, because it comes down to the calculation of the numbers. So here you have a member that's not eligible to vote. So that would only come into play if we were talking about a removal. But when we're talking about the disapproval on the front end, he's still a member. So you have 5 out of 7 to disapprove. That's under the Charter Article 3, Section 5A, which I'm sure you've studied. So that's what's before, well, that's actually before the entire council, but that's the issue before the committee as well. Furthermore, it is the mayor's executive powers.
I'm going to stop you right there, Director. The question was why an Ethics Commission opinion wasn't requested. We're getting way beyond the scope of that question, okay? So we're going to bring this back and focus the meeting. Thank you. As Councilwoman Heeman alluded to, I have a family member who's an elected official, a public official in ethics law, that is a member of a different organization. I requested an opinion, and I was given a higher standard than the law department or others have told me, because that's what the Ethics Commission told me to do, what they told me to do. This is not a superficial matter that can be easily dismissed. There's the reality of having a family member on council and a family member in a director position of the administration, in which council is to hold the administration accountable, responsible, and to fund the activities of the administration. Clearly delineating the responsibilities and any conflicts that have to arise and how we will deal with that is absolutely necessary for this to proceed. So, since there hasn't been one requested, I'll request myself an Ethics Commission opinion on this. I will tell you though, if the restrictions are anything like what I was given, this is going to be a very cumbersome relationship to navigate. So, we'll keep moving forward with this hearing. We're all here today. We all recognize the need, I hope, of having a safety service director. We haven't had one in 10 months and we've seen negative consequences of that. But we have to do this right. This is not a superficial matter. So,
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Schuman.
so if this was such a concern to you, why haven't you reached out to the Ethics Commission at this point? You've known about this for a while.
Mr. Chairman, I learned about this on Friday.
You're the chairman.
I'm sorry, Mr. Vice Chairman. I learned about this on Friday. I believe most of council learned roughly at the same time. Per the mayor's request to have this matter move forward, and again, I believe we all recognize the need to move forward to hire a safety service director.
Absolutely.
This is about as early as we possibly could have conducted this process. So, generally speaking, with the Ethics Commission, they strongly prefer that the parties who are relevant in the opinion request themselves so that they can have that information. I am less, the Ethics Commission normally doesn't seek to grant opinions to people that aren't involved in the situation directly. So I'm going to ask, I would encourage for their own interest, the councilman and the nominee to do so as well. But we need to have an understanding of what those restrictions will be if this is to move forward. Ms. Heeman.
Yeah, Mr. Chair? I want to specifically introduce into the record the mayor's email requesting that the hearing be conducted before the end of June. So that left a bare few days, Mr. Schuman. So I don't think that there's any intention of anyone, trying to hold up a hearing, but it was requested by the end of June. We're accommodating that request, and certainly I think that Councilman Limpert, with his education from a, very qualified military academy of our United States, would know that he could possibly need an ethics opinion. So, unfortunately, we don't have one, and I would agree as a chair, as a member of the committee, that we continue to move forward.
Okay. Mr. Limpert, in your resume, you indicated that you retired in or about 2019. In
Yes,
this
sir.
position, are you expecting or looking for this to be full-time employment?
It is a matter of full-time employment. Again, the charter may have changed in 12 years, but I believe it was in there that a service director is to be full-time with no other employment back then. Now, if it has changed since then, I am not aware of that.
Prior to your retirement, you worked with Bering Service Company. Was that your most recent employer?
Yes, it was.
Has that business done any work with the city to your knowledge?
They had done some business with the city. They had provided some considerable cost savings on, I know, belt purchases down at the wastewater treatment plant, and also on various lawnmower and other parts that they were asked to quote on, and they were far less expensive for the city, with quality when specific brand per brand is what's being asked.
Did these contracts occur at any time while you were on council or as a director previously?
When I was a director previously, I had no association with Bering Service Company.
Did Bering Service Company do business with the city of North Olmsted, to your knowledge, while you were on council or as the director for the city of North Olmsted of service or safety?
They did some business when I was service director, and again, I was not associated with Bering Service at that time.
What was your immediate employment before?
Nori Manufacturing, sir.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I'm behind you.
Mr. Kelly?
Yes, thanks. Mr. Limpert, did you previously held the position of safety director here in North Olmsted?
Yes, I did.
And who was the mayor at that time?
That was Mayor O'Grady.
Okay. How long did you hold that position as safety director?
I believe you have the exact dates on the paperwork I turned in. As recollection would go, I would say approximately 5-6 months, but again, I do not have that paper in front of me. You do.
Okay. So was that a full-time position, the safety director?
Well, I treated it as such, yes.
Okay,
I had no other employment during that time.
okay. And then you then became the service director?
Yes, our service director left the city. We had a number of projects that were on the verge of kicking off, and from my past history of council, things of being in the meetings of safety director, it made far more sense, and particularly with my background is stronger in the area of service, for me to slide into that position and have them do a search for a safety director, which they did and found an individual. Thing that I didn't put on there because I didn't know if we wanted to get into how many decades back you want to go, but as far as service, I spent 4 summers on the Ohio Turnpike learning to work with roads, concrete, knowing the difference between full depth patches, partial depth patches, what sort of bases to put in, building maintenance, a plethora of items in areas of knowledge.
Okay, so just to be clear, you didn't hold both those positions at the same time? Safety
It was
director.
not within the charter at that time
Okay.
for having to be one person doing both jobs.
Thank you, Mr. Limpert.
Mr. Chair.
Ms. Williamson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Limpert, could you be more clear, when you worked for Bering Manufacturing, were you working there, while you were on city council, correct?
Yes, I was.
Okay, but did they do any business with the city at the time that you were on city council? I don't think that question was answered.
I don't have my sales records with me from the 1980s and 90s. They may have bought an item or two. Yes, certainly nothing of any consequence, nothing of dollars, serious dollars.
But I would think that that's something that you would remember.
I do remember that they bought a few items, all of which saved the city of North Olmsted a considerable amount of money.
But you were also an employee at the time, correct? Thank you.
There, yes.
Ms. Heeman?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I understand when you were council president, you had the territory that serviced North Olmsted, and you chose, again, not to, look into would that be a conflict or not to your council president position while working for Bering Services. Did you relinquish the territory of North Olmsted to another salesperson, as is commonly done in that sales?
I had told my manager that I did not want any sales credit for anything that might come from the city of North Olmsted, and that because I lived in town, that I did occasionally, when called by an employee of needing identification or whatever, did that more or less as a civic service.
Okay, so you did step away from that territory of sales, correct or incorrect?
I stepped away from it as far
North
as...
Olmsted had another salesperson, is that true? I guess I just want to know, was it you or somebody else?
I think it was a
On
house
the record,
account.
just getting the commissions, that's all.
I think it was a house account.
I see. Okay, thank you. Mr. Chair?
Yes, Ms. Seaman?
Thank you. So, Mr. Limpert, you retired, I believe, from the city of North Olmsted in your council, after your council position ended. Is that when you retired, or?
I retired from, I was in this chair of president of council, and I did retire. There were major changes that were taking place, and it would have created a great sacrifice to my family if I would have not left council. Now, I could have very easily turned back around and then asked council to reappoint me to fill what I was doing, but ethically, to the people of North Olmsted, I felt you're either in or out, and I had to make a very difficult decision. And although my passion is the city of North Olmsted, I stepped away from it.
Okay, so you stepped away because the changes were coming forward from the State of Ohio pension program?
Yes,
And so now you want to, become employed again, because at that time, you didn't think it was a fair thing to do to double dip, so to speak, but now you think it's an okay thing to do?
no, it's not a case of that.
Well, it is, apparently. You're the one stated that you left to take advantage of a better pension system because you didn't want to give your family an unfair advantage, and that you could have, I could ask, I guess, for the record to be repeated, but that you could have asked to be reappointed, but you did not think that that was a good or fair or moral type thing. Is that
I
true?
felt it was better to step away for a while.
I see,
did
for a
not-
while, okay.
I
So
did
now
not-
it's okay for you to double dip and take your pension and then still have a full-time salary. I just want to know if it's okay, if that's what your statement is.
I did not come to the city of North Olmsted seeking this position. The
Oh,
city-
you did not?
I did not.
So how were you
The city of North
introduced?
Olmsted came to me
I see.
requesting that I help my city out and take this position.
I see. So you still, though, think it's okay for people to retire, collect pensions from the city, and then come back and get a salary? Is that a good thing or not a good thing?
Well, I think if council would have taken advantage of my twice request to please let me know if there was anything further they wanted to know and have me prepared to speak on,
Well-
I might be able to give you a much more detailed answer if I was given
Well,
fair warning.
it doesn't require a detailed answer, Mr. Limpert. It requires a yes or no. Do you think it's an okay thing for people to do or not?
I think if
Double
someone
dip at the
has, a-
city?
I think if someone possesses skills that the people of North Olmsted need at a time,
Okay.
that,
And Mr. Limpert, I'd like to stop you because I'd like to put forth and put on the record, as soon as I got your email as a committee member, I got your resume immediately from, transmitted through the mayor's office. And your first resume, quite frankly, had typos, it had incorrect grammar, and it had no dates or position titles, or your business experience beyond your city experience. It more heavily focused on your family background. I actually requested that very same day an updated, better resume. So please, I asked questions immediately to try to find out what other things we might be needing to find out from you.
and it might have been nice if those questions were...
Sir, I'm sorry, our Arts Commission people turn in professional resumes. So please don't accuse us of not preparing you. You need to prepare yourself to come to our committee. So that said, Mr. Limpert, I did ask immediately for a much more specific and professional resume. So I still don't have the answer to my question. Double dipping is okay or not okay? Would you recommend it to our city as an ongoing thing? Yes or no?
I feel there are situations...
Yes or no, Mr. Limpert, please. It's not complicated. It's yes or no. Double
Obviously,
dipping is good
yes.
or it's not.
Yes.
Okay. Taxpayers, I'm sure, love that. All right. And do you also think then that it's a fair statement for, Mr. Limpert, I'm sorry, your attention should be here to us. We're doing the interview.
Yes.
So my next question is, to continue to move our city forward, right, to bring it into the future and move it forward, do you think it's also a very good idea that we just keep sort of, revamping the past, sort of bringing it up again and again and again? You think that's okay? We should not hire or find new talent?
Oh, we definitely need to hire new talent, but we also need to honor old talent that
Okay,
can contribute. I
Okay.
think Steve Wolf put a very insightful thing on Facebook talking about the rookie mistakes of safety directors and service directors.
okay, well, I don't follow
Mr. Chairman.
Facebook as a council, measure to guide or instruct me in any way. I've spent 30 years in law firms, sir, 11 of those at Jones Day, and I kind of rely on that a little better than Facebook. So I do, would like to introduce at this time into the record, please, the fact that, well, we had one candidate brought forward early on that we chose not to interview because it was for a service position, but at the time, the mayor was not guiding us as to what we would do with the safety part of the job, so we sort of passed on that.
Mr. Chairman, if I could, because
No, Mayor, I've got the floor,
requested.
please. Thank you, it's our committee.
Yeah.
I would also like to introduce into the record, please, the fact that we had 8 candidates plus Mr. Limpert's resume that were never brought forward to us at all. Not at all, Mayor, not a single one of them.
I don't need to bring them forward to you.
Well,
It's
yeah,
your
I've got
job.
them right here, so I'll put all those resumes into our record. 3 of those candidates I would have really loved to talk to because they were good candidates from outside the city, strong backgrounds with other cities, and I have no idea why you would have chosen not to want to bring those candidates forward, but you did not. So I'll be putting this into the record.
Mr. Chairman, if I could, please respond.
Not at this time, Mayor.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
the role of the council committee and the council as a whole is to consent and approve the appointment that is offered by the mayor, is not conducting an interview of a candidate. I want that to be clear. That's the charter, and that's the ordinance, that's the duties that you're performing.
Thank you for
Mr. Butler,
clarifying
if I could
that.
ask you a question.
Mr.
Ms.
O'Malley.
Heeman said that they
Mr.
decided
Kennedy,
not to
you are out
interview my
of
first
order.
candidate. What is their responsibility in interviewing a candidate?
Well, Mayor, you didn't give us a response on the safety
I
part of
should've.
the job, and you weren't going
I
to
should've.
bifurcate the jobs, so
Mr.
you're the
Butler,
one
if
that
you
put
could-
them together as one job, and you didn't bring us, you only wanted to hire him for the
Mr.
safety
Moderator,
part.
what's their responsibilities in
Heeman,
interviewing?
please
Excuse
stop.
me, Mayor.
Mayor, please stop.
This is not your,
Ms. Heeman, thank you.
thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank
I'll
you.
yield the floor.
Are there other questions from council members?
Well, I have a lot, but I'll yield the floor, Mr. Chair.
I understand. Mr. Limpert, you indicated that the city reached out to you. When did that happen?
Excuse me, I couldn't quite hear. The mask makes it difficult.
Mr. Limpert, you indicated that the city reached out to you for this position. When did that happen?
That happened, I got a call, I believe it was Friday before last.
Yeah, maybe a week before, you know.
And asking if I would come in and speak with the mayor. That I did. He asked if I might be willing to help at this time as safety service director. I have the experience, I have the background, I have done an excellent job of those things. When I was service director, every project was done on time and either at or below budget. As safety director, I managed staffing issues at the fire department. I did just a number of things that were very helpful to the city. I have a track record here.
Mr. Chair.
Ms. Heeman?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, I'll also be putting into the record, you were suspended during your employment as our safety director? Yes?
I don't recall it. I occasionally had some issues with the mayor because the job, and mayor and I are still good friends, so it was nothing of a blood whatever.
Okay.
But there were times when we had a different opinion of what I felt. If you know the oath of office for a safety or service director, it is to uphold the charter and the laws and ordinances of the city of North Olmsted.
Of course.
I can't even tell you what the issue is now because it was so long ago, but we had a difference of opinion. And so I took what he had said because I served at his pleasure.
Okay.
But I performed as I saw my responsibilities.
Okay, so in your performance reviews,
Ms. Heeman, I'm going to stop you right there. If we're going to get into the performance reviews, I will call executive session,
thank you,
but just the general topic.
Thank you.
Or general description, I'll accept.
thank you.
Unless Mr. Limpert wishes to have the entirety in public, which is his
I
right.
think executive session is probably more courteous to all those that are not here. I am not concerned for myself. I'm very proud of what I did, making tough decisions. Did anyone always agree? No. But that's why we have a various number of people as we do, so that we can have other positions. I mean, performance review, for example. One thing was communications, I believe you're going to bring up. That was in one. But I felt that it was, the mayor had asked me if I was meeting weekly with my direct reports, having them all together. Have you ever sat in a meeting and counted the heads and then listened to the discussion and figure out how many of those heads have nothing to do with this discussion? Meanwhile, you're paying how many dollars an hour plus prep time and whatever. So I would either call my direct reports in, or I would
Mr.
go out to
Limpert.
see them.
I'm trying to give you leeway.
I appreciate
But
that.
we didn't ask you a question.
Okay.
On that, all of that, okay?
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Kelly.
Mr. Limpert, we've been having some issues with our trash and bulk pickup here in the city, which is a contracted item. There's been consistent repeated failures including pickup of the yard waste and so forth. Do you have any idea for fixes for that as a service director, or do you have
Yes,
any contact with the companies that do our pickup?
We had issues from time to time, which I rectified when I was service director. Of course, as you know, all companies, whether it's restaurants, wastewater, waste management companies or whatever, due to the COVID, are having staffing issues. But it is appropriate that there are contracts to be followed, and it would fall upon the service director to encourage strongly at the point of potential cancellation that those contracts be upheld.
Okay, thank you, that's a fair answer. Also, our culverts, our waterways, the flooding issues that we have in the city. I live on the east end of town. We have particular issues with that. On the east end, I know the whole city does, but there's a waterway, a creek that runs behind my house, runs next to Mr. Sturgeon's house. It runs through there, and it quite often gets clogged up with sticks. The barrier that is in front of the culvert is not proper. It's not the proper material. We have issues with that damming up. It's been brought to the attention of the city. Not too much has been done about that, although they just did a nice job of cleaning that out recently. But that all still needs to be repaired. Are those type things something that you would show some interest in?
Those are things that I've addressed in the past, of getting our guys out to clean up those sort of situations. Sometimes there's issues where we do not have an easement to get onto the property. But while I was service director, I made a point of every place we could. And I will tell you, since the mayor's phone call, the sound of rain has not been as pretty as it's been for the last 12 years.
All right, thank you, Mr. Limpert.
Before I go back to Ms. Heeman, are there any others who have questions? Mr. Broussard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is for Mayor Kennedy, I wanted to circle back to the eight other candidates that were mentioned by Ms. Heeman. Were any of these 8 other candidates given the opportunity of a phone call and invite to City Hall for an in-person interview, and did any of them progress beyond the point of first interview?
Yeah, I'm not looking at the resumes, but I would say most of them probably got an interview, at least half maybe, got an interview. And,
In person?
In person. And again, that's when I chose Jack Grasso. Jack waited around for an interview and never got one. The charter says they shall be interviewed, but he was never interviewed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr.
Ms. Jones.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, to the mayor, what was the date of the job opening posted through our Human Resources Department?
Marie might know. Director Gallo?
Mr. Chairman, Madam
Go ahead.
President, I believe the date that the job posting went up was sometime in January of this year. I think it was January 15th and taken down at the end of January, if I recall correctly, but it was in January of 2021.
Thank you. And so, Mr. Chair,
Yes.
and so those applicants would have come in then after January and would have been interviewed at some point between January and presumably...
About the same time Jack was interviewed, relatively speaking.
Thank you.
Ms. Williamson.
I thought Mr. Grasso came up well before the posting of the position. Am I incorrect about that?
Mr. Chair, I think that you're correct.
That was my recollection. Ms. Heeman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, Mr. Limpert, a lot of our things now, I mean, you've been gone for a while, you know, from the position and from the city, actually 9 years, really, because it was 2012. So my question is, are you familiar with, you know, how our technology has advanced, and how are you going to handle, you know, bringing everything up to speed with our traffic signaling and all of the things that have now advanced, you know, in the past 9 years?
I should not have any problem bringing myself up to speed with those issues.
Well, how do you, okay, that's fine. Do you have a plan for how you're going to do that? I mean, how,
Well,
since
first
you will
thing
be
I
the
can-
director, having to guide the employees, right?
Yes, and the first thing a good director will do is find out what the current situation was, or is. When I first got onto Consul, there was no, I don't think we had yet even a computerized traffic system. We then moved into getting one, which basically consisted of 5 separate traffic loops. As I was leaving Consul, or leaving the service director's post, or president, I think it was when I was leaving president of Consul, was the timing that we were moving to a single computer which would coordinate the signals throughout the city. Before, when we had the 5 could not talk to each other. So I need, if it is not my place right now to be, as a citizen, calling in various employees, city engineers from, do we still have Bowen, I assume?
Yes.
From Bowen, talking to Mr. DeFranco and the like, as a citizen. If Consul would like me to, or would affirm the mayor's choice to make me safety service director,
No.
I will certainly be doing that.
I was just asking if you were aware of how, you know, how far things had come in 9 years with our technology here at the city, and that there would be, I think, a fair amount of work to kind of, you know, bring that up to speed with regard to being able to manage all of those and our employees. I have another question, Mr. Chair, if I may.
Yes, Ms. Heeman.
Mr. Limpert, in your resignation letter, I believe you said that, you know, or even mentioning here this evening that perhaps, you know, you no longer desired to be split between your family and service to the city, that you were much, you know, you had given enough time, and that now you were wanting to spend time with your family. I think you probably know that, you know, our service directors from when you left into present, have really sort of had a 24/7 sort of job, really, because our city really never stops, and, problems happen all the time that need addressed. So are you fully prepared, sir, to, undertake a 24/7?
I am not only prepared, I have lived it.
Okay,
Mr. Councilman Kelly talking about Ward 2 issues, many a night, I was up all night
okay.
with the crews, keeping our citizens safe from flooding. My direct reports, a number of them, were very concerned that I was going to burn myself out because of everything that I do. And if you look at my
Sure.
accomplishments, I think you would have to admit that's very impressive, particularly when you consider a number of them were done as a councilman.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Human.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Kelly?
Under your highlights of the achievements for the city, there's a pretty impressive list here.
Thank you.
One of it says that you sponsored and helped write the first residential property maintenance code. Could you expound on that a bit?
Yes, I did. I felt we had a business property maintenance code. As a council member, I felt in our neighborhoods, the effect of the exterior of your neighbor's house affects your house. And so I went to the law department, said, we need to do something about this. They asked, what would you like in it? And I proceeded to tell them a number of items, at which time then also I learned Councilman Nasher was interested in an exterior property maintenance code. So he contributed also, and it was a collaboration, and there were some things on the list, and I can't remember, but where Law Director Grove, the elder, would say, well, we really can't do that, but we can do this. And that's how you craft legislation working collaboratively. And several of the council members at the time thought we were being politically suicidal for our career, but it was important to the city and to our residents that they would have their neighborhoods kept up. So we took the steps and then secured the votes on council to make that happen.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Limbert, there's been a number of changes to that code. We've more than doubled, I believe, quadrupled the amount of inspectors, for example, since the program initiated. Are there any aspects of the building inspection on the residential or residential apartment, or rentals, I should say, that you would change or modify, and if so, what?
I will have to see the current code before I speak to that. I knew if in the ways that if the first one was deficient in any ways, one really should walk before they run. And I think it was an excellent getting the ball rolling or walk to get it to where we could improve our city's look. And I believe that is under building as far as the code, which unless it has changed, building department is under the planning director, not anymore, now it is under the, okay. But anyways, it's not under the safety or service director anymore. It used to be under safety, and when I was safety director, I had responsibility for that, but I pretty much figured that was not the case any longer.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Kelly?
If I may, to the Assistant Law Director, I'm not trying to pile on here. So Councilman Limpert is on the Streets Committee and a couple other committees. The Safety Service Director sort of oversees a large percentage of the employees in the city of North Olmsted. If those committees are dealing with an issue that the Safety Service Director would be involved in, is there going to be a conflict there with that? I didn't hear you, sir.
I said no.
No, okay.
Mr. Limpert, is it your intention for matters with council, especially committee hearings, to represent the safety and service departments yourself, or are you looking to have others represent you?
Currently, I plan on representing myself. However, from past history and past experience, there are times when it is far wiser to not only have, for example, the safety director there, but to have the police chief there if it's a police issue, or have the fire chief there if it's a fire issue, or in a service situation, budget time, to perhaps request that a foreman of the streets, for example, come in to explain why he wants a certain piece of equipment and the like. So I will not be telling my people, you cannot go to council, with me. In fact, I will be asking them to time. Wastewater is another key area where regulations change, and sometimes it's very wise to have somebody most familiar with what the EPA is asking for to assist, rather than just say, oh, I know everything.
So as Mr. Kelly alluded to, again, there's fluctuations with employees coming and going, but something like 75% of all city employees fall under safety and service.
Yes?
You mentioned that, you indicated that safety was a full-time job when you held it for the 5 or so months. You indicated service was a full-time job when you held that position for a few years. Do you believe that safety and service can be done by one person?
It has been done that in the past, a number of years ago, and council approved to make those changes in the charter. So apparently council does believe one person can handle that.
Oh.
Ms. Heeman.
Yeah,
Go
thank
ahead.
you, Mr. Chair. Law Director, could you explain, how the charter review works? Because I don't want to leave the guests with the, thought that council approves whatever they want to change the charter. That's not the process. So for Mr. Limper to say that, council voted to change that, that's not really how it works. So could you just briefly describe that process,
So you're
that it's actually
referring-
a ballot?
You're referring to a ballot that...
Yeah, because Mr. Limper just said that we voted to change that, and
approved
so
by-
please explain.
Yeah, and true, ballot changes were done to remove the positions from the charter.
Correct.
However, in doing so, the positions of Department of Public Safety and Department of Public Service were then moved into the administrative code and to be determined by the city council.
Yep, what I'm getting at,
What I was getting at is
Yeah.
that the council has, through its ordinances, determined that one person can serve in both roles. It's
correct, but
130
charter changes are at the ballot
True,
level.
but
So the voters decide that.
139.02, and I think it's 141.02.
Yep,
So there is some truth to the indication that the council is determined by ordinance that one person can serve in both roles.
okay.
Great. Mr. Limpert, what I'm trying to get at is, in the process to fill the vacancy from our previous safety service director, we went almost 6 months before we had a potential candidate. We were given a candidate for only one portion of the job, for the service portion. You indicated in your remarks earlier that you did the safety position, but really you were more suited to do the service position, and that's why you moved, unless there's a different reason you wish to elaborate on. So what I'm trying to figure out is if you have the time and capacity, or quite frankly, does anyone have the time and capacity to do both jobs adequately, because up to this point, your prior service was not doing both jobs at the same time, and the previous candidate was not suited to do, was not presented to do both jobs. So how will you manage doing both jobs if you are approved for this position?
Well, let me first answer or come to your first statement. that if I felt I was stronger at service than at safety, if you have a student that gets a B+ in one course and an A in the other, one would apparently think that the A is their stronger suit, or whichever grades you care to assign to that. As I said, I was doing the safety director job, and there were a number of key projects that needed to take place, and they needed service right then. And I was well equipped to make that step over to that.
Ms. Williamson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Lippert, what were your greatest accomplishments while you were safety director?
I think one of the greatest accomplishments that I had as safety director was managing the committee that was a joint committee between administration and the fire department on what was termed safe staffing. And I had a very broad background of, besides from what I know about fire departments, and I in the past had a number of family members who were firemen, as the union would come forward asking us to come with their comparatives as far as, look at this city, and they have so many more firemen than North Umstead, for example. Because of my job in the past of covering 7 states, I was familiar with those cities. And like when they wanted to compare us to one city that had no other communities around it, had a number of 150-year-old homes made of wood on 40-foot lots, naturally with no support from outside cities, that sort of housing, it was very important that they have a larger fire staff. We are fortunate and blessed in North Umstead to call on, and we often do through mutual aid, Fairview, Westlake, Umstead Falls, North Ridgeville. On the big fires we've had, Rocky River, Bay Village, we have a tremendous amount of fire staffing. I worked, you asked for only when I was as a director, so I won't get into the various things that I did as a councilman.
Let me bring it back. I want to know what your accomplishments are, because I want to know how you feel you're qualified to be the safety director, how you feel you're qualified to do that job.
Okay, well, I've done it already. I've been out on...
For 5 months, correct?
Yes.
Okay. All right, I would like for you to elaborate on that. I know we're kind of getting around the circle there, and I kind of lost me with the story. So if we could just stick to the question, please.
Trying to pull up from 15 years ago the exact, details on a number of things is difficult at this time.
But I know that earlier you remembered your evaluations and communications, but you didn't remember a number of other issues, and I'm not trying to jab. I'm just trying to, I guess, validate, the qualifications that you have that would benefit the city and our residents.
Well, part of the
And
reason
not
I
basing it
remembered
from something
communications
20
is
years
I did
ago.
dig up some of my old personnel records just to familiarize myself. And I had...
So you pulled your personnel records, is that?
That I had, those that my wife had retained at home.
Okay.
I did not have everything. I know she was, quite frankly, telling me for the last 10 or 12 years, get rid of all this stuff. You're not doing that anymore.
But you didn't recently request it from anyone here in the city?
No, I didn't.
Okay. So, again, what makes you qualified to be the safety director?
From years of being in your position, from years of working around the administration, going back as far as the various things that have taken place by other generations of my family, which I learned sitting around the dinner table. I think I am probably, and also working with many, many other safety directors, quite frankly, I will stack myself up against any of them as being more than adequate, and perhaps much more than a number of them, going past administrations.
With all due respect, my daughter has grown up in law enforcement. That does not mean that she's qualified to be a law enforcement officer. There takes a lot of training. and more knowledge than sitting at a table and talking to people. I'm just trying to get to the bottom of where your
Well, as
qualifications
I also had
are.
put on my sketch, and that, by the way, the resume issue was not a formal resume. That was just to give Mayor Kennedy some talking points. It was not originally planned to be, in my opinion, going out to council, typos or whatever. You get a phone call that says, hey, I want to talk to you about this position, and so you throw something together just to bring it in. Anyways, I have gone through the Citizen Police Academy to learn various things about law enforcement.
What
As I
is
say,
that?
I've been involved with fire departments. I've spent 24 hours at the fire department, learned quite a bit.
One time? Or, I'm
Yes,
just,
how many times have you spent 24 hours there?
I didn't say I was qualified to be the public
Okay.
safety director.
So, yes, I have done that. And as I say, I think it's very, I feel very qualified.
Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Williamson. Mr. Broussard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hi, Dwayne.
Hi, Luke.
I have a question regarding the labor contracts that we go through with our bargaining units, such as police, fire, ASME, et cetera. Do you have prior experience with that, and do you plan to be the point person on those when they come up in the future?
I have prior experience from when I was Safety and Service Director. I think it's very important that when we do those, that we do have professional help, people much more familiar with it than, for example, myself. I think it's important I'm part of the process. But as you know, those can become very complicated. The city has at times gone through those operations strictly relying on our in-house committee of directors. We've also, from time to time, depending on what the issues were, have brought in additional legal help as the situations dictate. So we will see what those situations are, and I will tell you my opinion when they come about on whether it's something that should be handled strictly in-house or whether some outside, experts are being brought in. But again, that will be just one part of the component. It will be the mayor's decision, and we will all respect that.
Thank you.
Mr. Limpert, was it during your time as safety director or service director that you were suspended?
It was during my time as safety director.
If you indicated you had a disagreement and on principle you stuck to your guns more or less.
Yes.
If you have a similar disagreement with the mayor, have you learned differently from that experience, or how would you handle such a situation if one were to occur again?
I did inform the mayor during our meeting that I said, just so we're clear on this, I said I will serve the people of North Olmsted at the pleasure of the mayor's office and with the confirmations of council. And I think that is a direct quote, is it not?
I think it's fair.
So I think that answers it very well. And I think I'll be able to be, quite frankly, very independent, because the first go-around, I was younger. I needed a job. This go-around, I do not need this job. I choose to serve the people of North Olmsted.
Before I continue, are there any other folks who would like to ask questions? Ms. Heeman?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Limpert, in looking, at your expanded resume, which I thank you for submitting to us, it's very detailed. Thank you.
Thank you.
To Councilwoman Williamson's point, in looking at your certifications and trainings, there's nothing here that seems to be more current than and applicable maybe from 2001 and 2007. So there is something from, 2009, but it's a like an H1N1, flu certification, which is really not relative to safety director or service. So again, asking, what training, formal training do you have really that qualifies you as our safety director?
I have not attended additional certification courses. Quite frankly, I did not think I would need additional safety training courses as an industrial salesman.
Oh, could you speak, can you?
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay, thanks. It's,
I had moved
yeah, I
it
know.
for the personnel
We all forget,
director.
it's hard to remember the
But they say
whole.
I have not sought additional safety training since that time because as an industrial salesman, I did not feel I needed additional municipal safety
Okay,
training.
but, sir, but you were our safety director for that period of time. So these certifications, I'm asking, I guess, then, again, specifically, what formal training have you had, and how would you now approach obtaining that to serve as our safety director?
Well, one of the things I will be doing is consulting with our police and fire chiefs on what additional training they might feel would be helpful to me. They say I went to the Field of Heat program as a councilman, which gave me a great deal of knowledge of exactly what firemen do. I had gone to the local academy.
Well, again, sir,
I think
not
I've answered
since
the
like
question, ma'am,
2007.
that I had not feel that it was important.
I'm asking, so what are you going to do now, if we approve it? What would you do now to bring yourself
I think I just
up
said
to
that,
those-
but I'll be consulting with the police and fire chief for what additional training they think would be helpful for me.
Okay,
Thank you, Ms. Heeman.
thank you.
Moving towards the safety aspect of the position, Mr. Lippert, what was your system or what was your approach to the sewer maintenance at the time that you were the service director during your previous service?
That was quite a task, because we had a lot of problems, and we had problems with the EPA at that time. One of the biggest challenges was to explain to the EPA that as a city at that point in time, we were not poor, but we were broke. Poor is you've never had money, never going to have money, and you're not going to have it again. Broke is you've had money, you don't have money right now, but you're going to have money again. So we did the best we could with cleaning sewers. In fact, I ended up upgrading our Vector truck that we had, which was I'm trying to recall, the one that we had prior was a 1974 or 78, which was in great need of replacement. So we got a new Vector truck so our guys could get out there in the system. We also started working on getting a new rate structure in place. One of the things that I had put on when I was a councilman once was the idea of holding off a rate increase until the administration came up with a plan of what they were going to do, because the plan was we're going to raise the rates and then we'll raise the rates again and raise the rates without any additional cost looking at, which I rectified as far as various things of, one, going from Zempro to centrifuge. And one thing about nice being an industrial salesman, I had the references of many, many wastewater plants, because I called at Cleveland Regional Sewer District's southerly, easterly, westerly, Chardon, Euclid's, French Creek, so I could compare what they do and what takes place for, good sound judgment. The other thing was working to get the revamp of the wastewater plant so we could become more efficient. And I think we have succeeded in that. If you choose to not object to me becoming service director, I will find exactly how we are stacking up with the plans that I put forward then. And
Similar question towards streets. What was your approach? What was your system, if you will, for streets while you were service director?
two things that I think were significant. One was putting in place the street rating program. So it wasn't simply of, who's got more pull, as far as whether this street's done in this ward or that street's done in that ward, what street can be best managed, and with that working in the fact of trying to do the worst first, but if you could save a street early to keep it from having to be a complete rebuild, make those appropriate decisions to save costs. Furthermore, I instituted buying a crack sealer, which was something the city had been without for quite some time, because if you're familiar with frost wedging, once you get a crack in the road, water gets down there, and we've all experienced with our driving back and forth to work. Just about March or so is when finally all the streets start popping. And so we instituted a crack sealing program, and that has greatly increased the life of our streets. In fact, many of the streets, we were lucky if we got serviceable 10 years out of them, and I think we're getting 20 in many cases now due to those steps that I took as service director.
So I guess what I'm trying to understand is reconciling the differences between the administrations. That you previously served, because there was significant campaign animus at the time between the administration you served and then when the new administration, which is our current administration, came in. We've consistently heard over the years here that the city was left, as you indicated, broke, without systems for sewer maintenance, without systems for road maintenance. That doesn't quite match what you're saying today. I wasn't participating in the city government to know which is the case now. What I want to understand is how, with that experience moving forward, again, there's a little bit of cognitive dissonance going on. Will you do the same approach as you did at that time? Will you do different? And if so, what would you do differently for the systemic maintenance, whether it be sewer, streets, et cetera?
Just to be clear, on the broke comment, that was within our wastewater system plant and system, that there was not sufficient funding in the wastewater treatment fund due to inflation, due to time, those sort of things. We were not broke when it came to street repair, but we managed to focus in and target the better spending of those dollars so that we could get the best effect for our residents. Because let's face it, as we all know, neighborhood deterioration starts at the center line of the street. And when the street is in good shape, people take better care of their houses.
Ms. Heeman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Limpert, I'm not sure that the question was clear. Councilman Glassburn is referring to the fact that, you know, there was this conversation always that the previous administration, you know, put us into debt, the previous administration did this, that, the other. Of course, you participated in that administration, so did you feel that, you know, it was too much debt, or, I mean, do you understand that
Yes,
we're a little confused, right?
Oh, well,
Because if
I think
we
you are
were
also
left
on
with
this
too much
point, but I
debt
can perhaps clarify.
if we were left with too much debt and poor management from a previous administration, and now, you know, the mayor is wanting to bring you back, we want to understand that there's a discrepancy or not. We don't understand because I did not participate in the previous administration.
Right. During the previous administration, debt was being reduced. Also during that time, it was a difficult time because not only was there a recession taking place, there also, due to the structure from previous administrations going back probably 10, 15 years, the finance director might be able to further elaborate, that there were heavier debt payments to be repaid during the previous administration to Mayor Kennedy. So, but if you look at the overall debt during those years, debt for the city of North Olmsted went down during those years, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, during those years when I was a director. Is that correct?
I think that we've followed a steady approach.
And Mayor Kennedy has continued that trend.
We were kept out.
Yeah.
That's Carrie Cosburn on the record, sorry.
Director Kopfer indicated a more or less agreement with Mr. Limpert's summary.
Thank you.
Other questions from
Thank you.
council members? Mr. Broussard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I want to circle back again to the question that I had for the mayor about the other 8 or so applicants that that were considered. I'm just trying to, this is not a knock on Dwayne. I've known Dwayne a long time. I like Dwayne. And my question, though, is it appears that there were probably a lot of qualified applicants of the lot of 8 that we had that had both qualified and formal training in both service and safety, but they didn't merit a second interview, apparently. So, you know, what is it about Dwayne that has made you wait for Dwayne?
Well, again, when I interviewed some of these people, and I don't have the resumes in front of me, so I'm not sure who I interviewed and who I didn't, but at that point I picked Jack Grosso and put him forward to you. He didn't get an interview. He did listen in with his wife on council meetings and felt like it probably wasn't the right time for him, as he indicated to me. So in meeting with my staff, the chiefs and the foreman, they didn't want to bring someone in that I had to train, you know, someone that they were going to have to train, knowing that there's an election coming up and things could change. So that's when I asked Dwayne to see if he would help out, and I knew you wouldn't have to retrain him. He knows all the people, knows the players, and so I nominated Dwayne.
Okay.
Ms. Williamson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mayor, Mr. Grasso's nomination came back in November. These new resumes came in January when you posted the position. Is that correct?
I don't know. I don't know
So
any of the dates, but
I don't know.
but I interviewed those people when I interviewed Jack. So maybe November. Maybe there was two different sets of resumes. I don't know.
Well, if we didn't advertise for the position, then how did Mr. Grasso find out about it in November?
I think we did advertise for the position, and that's when I interviewed.
November?
I believe so. I don't know when did I put Jack's name forward? I don't know. I interviewed these people along with Jack. You know, I mean, probably within the same week or two.
But if Mr. Grasso came before us in November, I don't know how these other people came in January when the job was posted. So I think there's two different timelines that we're working on. I'm just trying to figure out which
Maybe there
timeline
are,
we're at.
but if Jack came in November, then I interviewed people in November.
Oh,
It doesn't make sense.
I don't know what you're looking at. I'm just giving you my honest answer.
his email.
Anyone want to clarify that?
Yeah, I can.
Thank you.
Ms. Seaman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mayor, we're not trying to give you a hard time, really, but, you know, in the question, well, we're not really, actually.
Well, go ahead.
Okay. You know, we're all here to serve residents, right? But Ms. Williamson is correct, because when the discussion came up, and we're happy to pull the emails, they're dated, this isn't like a secret or rocket science, everything's public record. That was November, and one of my very direct questions, you know, at a meeting was the job posted? And the answer you gave was no. So people could not have been able to apply if they were not, if the job had not been posted.
Well,
I don't really want to debate it. I mean, we can go back to the record, but she's just asking the question.
I must have interviewed those people after Jack was turned down.
It was October
Thank you.
30th. I was mistaken.
Oh, October, yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
So I want to keep this to Mr. Limpert's
Yeah.
nomination to the best that we can. I do think it's somewhat, not to use it's not a legal term, but fair game to ask, what has been, Mr. Mayor, the change that you decided to bring a candidate or Mr. Limpert versus you previously chose to fulfill this spot or these positions yourself, since we entertained the Grasso nomination?
I would just say that I feel like Dwayne is the right guy for the job. We realize that, first of all, with an election coming up, you got to assume you're going to have the job for 6 months, and basically, anyone that's coming from another job doesn't want to take the job with an election coming up. So Dwayne was perfect for the job. He knew the job. He knows all the players, and I'd be excited to have him on board.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Schuman.
Okay, I would like to, first off, Mr. Limpert.
Yes, sir.
I really appreciate you coming and putting yourself through this. I think this is tough. I mean, not an enviable position to be in. And I know you, and I know you have probably served in more capacities for the city than anybody ever has historically. I also know you've been done an enormous amount of, you've been recognized for your volunteer work, and certainly been elected multiple times, been elected citywide. We do need to fill this position, and again, I appreciate you coming forward to take the job. I think it would be really council, it'd be a matter of council not doing its job to not approve your nomination. I believe if we had approved Mr. Grasso back when the mayor had nominated him, we'd probably have him in a position of both safety and service at this point.
Without question.
And I think that was a mistake that we made. And I believe of course, it's not our job to interview those 8 candidates. Has nothing to do with us. It's a matter of you bringing a candidate to us. You've brought Mr. Limpert to us, and I, for one, plan on voting for your nomination. So, thank you.
Mr. Limpert, switching gears, on your resume, one of your achievement points that you had mentioned was that you had, as director, reduced staffing and maintained results. How does staffing, to your knowledge, compare today to then? Are you looking to reduce staffing now? Could you elaborate on, again, you're going to be supervising about 75% of our employees.
Correct. It is not my intent to reduce staffing. Economics could confront the situation where it happens. I will have to wait till I get in the position to see where. Certainly, we have more than enough work in this city to keep more than the current amount of employees busy. But we have to deal with the realities of the situation. The economics, we as a city cannot make like the federal government and print money. We have to live within our means. During the time I was there, we did not lay off, but we did consolidate and could not afford to keep the number of employees that we would have liked to have had. So when individuals were retiring and the like, we had to work without that number of people rather than bringing on an employee that we cannot afford. It doesn't do any good to have a man that can fill potholes if you don't have any money to buy pothole fill. It doesn't do any good to have a policeman if you cannot properly equip him. So balances have to be made.
Ms. Heeman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I just want to, Mayor, this absolutely is what you want.
Myself?
The mayor,
Oh, excuse me.
if I may address Mayor Kennedy.
Yes, he's in front of you right now.
Okay, well, I'm just wanting to be sure because, you're asking us to do this and it's your choice, obviously, your preference, and I want to be sure that that is what you want. Okay?
Ms.
Thank you.
Williamson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Limpert, in your achievements, you state that you had efficiencies over at the wastewater treatment plant and cost-saving programs. If you had discussed this, I apologize, I may have missed this portion, but could you tell me what programs you've instituted to for the cost savings and how you did that?
One of the major ones that we did was, and I was asked to spearhead it through council when I was on council, was moving from the Zempro process, which I can explain if you care to hear about it, which is a very expensive process, to a centrifugal process. And myself, as I say, with my background of being very familiar with a number of plants, realized what a cost savings that would be. Also, from a cost savings, as a director's standpoint, was to modernize the plant. Our plant has had a number of upgrades over the years, but still had a number of areas that were very, very labor intensive. For example, the inflow screens coming in from the system. All of the plants, almost that I call it, I would like to say all, but maybe you could find one that didn't, had automatic rakes for those screens. We were still dealing with sending a man out there several times a shift with a rake and a wheelbarrow to clean the incoming screens of the influent water, to sticks, you name it, that might be coming through, paper cups that would block those screens. We also had where our, well, to give you an example, what we had and what we were getting when I left. To go and with a storm like we just experienced today, it would be preparation of all hands on deck to physically turn the valves, moving to get the system changed from normal operation to what they call storm mode. The system that I worked on getting, you go like this, push, 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 and all of that, literally that amount of time, and automatically all those systems would adjust and change. In the old system of what we had, if you wanted to check a tank level, you had to send a runner out there to physically check it. With what I believe we have, because I had left the position before it was finished, all you had to do was look at a SCADA screen and say, oh, we need more money or more water, or more air, or whatever you needed more of or less of, and push from a central control system, and it was done, rather than running a man out with a valve to change the dial to do the whatever. So that was something that was very major, and was something I felt needed to be done, that we needed to be getting ready for the 21st century.
Thank you.
Which we were just entered, in fact.
Mr. Chair, if I may?
Yes.
Follow up one
Ms.
more.
Williamson.
I'm not sure if the law department can answer this question, but I believe there were some legal issues following the wastewater treatment plant, and I don't recall when. But I believe that we had to retain the services of a law firm to look into some of these issues that were put in place at the plant. Can you?
I cannot.
Remind us about that?
No.
I believe we employed Hazen and Sawyer.
No, I don't have enough of a recollection of the, specifically what the fallout was. I do recall we had a class action flooding suit that involved the city and several others and the county, and that was resolved. There was I believe there may have been some demands made on the contractors that performed the work to require that it be done right. We usually like to insist that we get what we pay for, but I don't know or recall the dates, the details.
Okay.
But the city always wins. That was a joke.
Are there other questions from council? Mr. Limpert, as we have looked forward to new challenges that the city is facing and going to face in the future, we're having somewhat different problems and different ways of interacting with the public. One of the ways that we interacted with the public most recently was to do a survey about what residents wanted concerning Clegg Road. Ultimately, the administration did not follow those recommendations or wishes of the public. How are you going to interact with the public, or would you still seek to do surveys on such projects?
I would be happy if you were going to have a meeting with residents or whatever. I'd be happy to attend. with the project. I'm very familiar with getting various projects done. During my tenure, we did the Clegg Road South. We did Stearns Road, the Stearns Crocker. We did the Great Northern Boulevard areas, so I have had an extensive amount of material, and they say all those were done on time, or actually ahead of schedule, and at or below budget, and they turned out to be very nice projects. One of the things we need to work with and always be cognizant of is looking to how we can best maximize our dollars. And for example, if we could just have our own little printing press, and I'm sure as Director of Public Service, that makes the buildings my responsibility. I can find a place if you would like to buy a little printing press that'll make all the money we want to use. I'll find a place for it within the city. Otherwise, we have to live within the constraints of our finances. So we need to look very carefully at getting coordination between ourselves, the state, the county, federal government, getting those various dollars brought into our project, and what consensus, how far are they willing to go at this time. If you look, for example, over in Westlake, a lot of these roads north-south roads are becoming 4-lane. If you also have been driving through those for a number of decades, you start with the intersections, like we did at Lorraine and Clegg, and we did at I-480 and Clegg. And then you fill in, it doesn't get done all as one project. And projects do take time. For example, Stearns Crocker, several residents at the time we were doing it said, how can you just spring this on me of all of a sudden coming up with this idea that you're going to put a 4-lane road in? I was in 7th grade when I learned about it going to become a 4-lane road someday. It takes time, and you have to put the pieces of the puzzle together. You just can't say, well, I want to do it, make it happen, Mayor. He needs consensus of the county, of the state, the various funding bodies to make these things happen. And quite frankly, sometimes you have to take what you can get when you can get it, and then you come back to the table again to get the next piece of the puzzle, and over time, you get exactly what you want, and you only pay pennies on the dollar, rather than funding the entire thing yourself. I mean, if you want to fund it all yourself, you have the purse strings. But there are consequences always to our decisions of what we fund and what we choose not to at this time.
What I'm seeking, I appreciate the understanding your philosophy of approaching this, is that should we do projects in the future, if we offer options in surveys or in interactions with the public, that we do not offer options that we have no intention of ever doing or ever presenting, if that is the case or the will of the administration, so that we don't mislead the public or falsely raise hopes if we do not have the means or do not have the intention of exploring those options. That's what I'm trying to get at. So if we do interact with the public, if we make, whether it's with our buildings, with our roads, anything else, that we only present options that we intend to actively consider.
Well,
And have the
I will
means
be
to
happy to
do.
accompany any council member to any group that you have of citizens, whether it be a homeowners association, a street, a neighborhood. It's not my first rodeo. I've been to a number of those, and sometimes you have to tell the people that we can do this. It's going to take some time. I can remember over in your development, Lou, where we had a flooding issue, and a lady was in, and this administration, I was a councilman at the time, was reacting, getting the engineering study done to look for a different whatever, and then a lady insisted that she wanted the project started next week. Well, there was no project yet, you need to do it right. And when I said, we're working on it, we'll get you an answer, she says, my children play, I said, one thing you might want to do in the meantime, I said, I know it's not what you want to hear, because she had been on her 3rd set of carpeting, was you might want to consider putting tile floor down like we had, and she explained to me that her children play video games and they must sit on carpet, they can't sit on a tile or a pillow on a tile. So you can't make everybody happy, but you can give realistic, and I think, Lou, we took care of much of that. Not always. God can always beat you when it comes to rain. Just ask Noah. But I think we made great strides forward in that area. And again, for the time I was there, what has happened recently, I can't attest to, hasn't been my job.
Mr. Limpert, would you be looking to change the consulting firm that we use for studying our road projects?
I would be, if asked by the mayor's administration to look into it, I'd be happy to put my input in on the current firm or others they're looking at. As the director, it is not my place to be trying to create a revolution. Bowen has done many good things. When I was a director, they proposed some projects, and quite frankly, I don't want to use the word squelched, but let's just say those projects didn't happen because they weren't in the best interest of the city. Bowen has also presented some wonderful projects that I think has been a great boost to the city. And it's worked out, I think, for now.
The reason I'm asking, Mr. Limpert, is the consulting firm that we hired and have utilized a few times on this Clegg Road project, one of the two primary authors of the study is now a political candidate at the request of the mayor. That certainly creates a conflict of interest, both in terms of principle and in appearance. So I am asking you, or will you seek to change the vendors so that we don't have political candidates of any stripe or political firms of any stripe doing expert consulting for our city?
I have no prior knowledge to any of this. This was some reason I approached Chuck several times on the phone. Please let me know if there are specific things that council would like to discuss. I think it would be irresponsible of me to start offering opinions on something that I have no firsthand knowledge and have not had the opportunity to look into.
Are there other questions from council members?
Mr. Chairman, I don't have a question, but I do have a comment. When you're about done, please, then let me know.
I have one minor question, and then feel free to go ahead. Again, moving forward, looking towards the future of the city, we, in the past, had homeowners associations as a partner, if you will, in terms of maintaining common areas or very visible areas in the city, whether it be signage in front of developments, cul-de-sacs, et cetera. Those organizations, as times change, have fallen by the wayside. And now we have ambiguous maintenance of lands that are arguably common, but maybe those homeowners associations don't even exist anymore, or the homeowners associations that do exist, the people who are the constant volunteers are getting up in age. Do you have any thoughts on how you would approach the common areas that are now becoming more of a public nuisance?
At this point in time, I can only speak to what has been done in the past. We did have an issue in the Deerfield area where they had a homeowners association very similar to what I have in my development, West Park Forest Ridge Civic Association, where there were no deed covenants written into it. The one difference, they had a common area, which my development doesn't have. They also had a pool. When they reached that situation, came forward to the city, I think, did the very responsible thing, because if they would have said, we'll take over the maintenance of your pool, we'll take care of the mowing, we'll take care of this, we'll take care of that, it would be no time at all that even those developments with deed covenants, such as Canterbury Woods, Sandy Ridge, Brenton Ridge, would be saying, you did theirs, do ours, which would be a bit of a budget buster. What we did offer to those associations, that if you would like to convey the land to the city, and this is your initiative and not ours, what we will do is we will take this land, we will sell it, and we will take the proceeds from that land and put it into the nearest park, which is today the Bridgeport Homes, and those proceeds went into Clegg Park. But they say, you have to think the next step forward, that if, as much as you'd love to say yes to something, you have to think, what will the consequences be of that decision? And lots of times, in the long run, you don't realize the snowball that you're creating. So I thought the council was very responsible at that point in time as far as handling a situation similar to what you're mentioning.
Mr. Kelly?
Mr. Limpert,
Yes, sir.
I just want to say I appreciate the professional way that you handled all of our questions tonight. I know these can be difficult situations and quite uncomfortable, and I think most of us have probably been in uncomfortable positions before. I know I have, and I do appreciate the way that you handled this, and I thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that comment.
Ms. Heeman?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to thank you, Mr. Limpert.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time and your detail here tonight with us, and my very difficult questions. Thank you.
You are most welcome.
Are there any other comments? Ms. Jones?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To Assistant Law Director O'Malley, following up on Councilwoman Williamson's question about the legislation regarding the wastewater treatment plant, if you could please get back to council. It was Resolution 2011-79 that the councilwoman was referring to. And if you could please just get council a description as to what exactly that was for, and then what was the result of that. We would appreciate that.
Absolutely,
Thank
Madam
you.
Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ms. Jones. Are there any other questions or comments? Okay. So my understanding is to this process, and please, clerk, correct me if I'm wrong, is that the committee will do a recommendation. Whether that recommendation is favorable or negative, the nomination will proceed to the council meeting on Thursday. Given that one of the members has to recuse on the vote, it is still that 5 members have to vote negative or 6 in order to reject the nomination. If 2 or more vote in the affirmative, the nomination will proceed.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I would defer to the Assistant Law Director on the number. I know the rules state all council members, so I assume it would have to be 5 to not proceed, but I don't know if one is not able to participate, if that changes that number.
5.
5 is the number.
5 to disapprove.
Okay. I think we all now understand. So if there are no further comments or questions, at this time, I would move to recommend the nomination of Mr. Limpert for the Safety Service Director to the full council and ask for a second.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Schuman. Roll call, please. Or are we just do aye or nay? Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. And that is a 3-0 recommendation at this time. We will close the meeting at 8:59 PM. Thank you all for attending.
Just something to share with you.